Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Spicy Noodles podcast, where you get to hear the three of us give our takes on today's hot topic. I'm Calvin.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Gingy.
All right, and today we're going to cover the topic of the protests and riots that are currently breaking out across the U.S. right now. So, uh, let's have Gingy start us off.
Yeah. Hi, all my good noodles. I guess what I wanted to focus on with the topic is not really making comments on the Black Lives Matter movement or with what's going on with current political issues, but I guess more on just the topic of police brutality and these feelings of inaction that I'm sure um, a lot of people staying at home while watching a lot of like their friends or even family going out to these protests, and maybe they're not doing so. So because of that, maybe feeling like not feeling necessarily that they're worthless, but just these kinds of feelings of inaction and how they're just not brave enough or more negative feelings. Do you guys feel like you've had similar emotions, or is it more like you've been able to really calm it down and like reason yourself through it?
Well, to start off, I don't necessarily feel like I'm taking any inaction because I feel like there's more ways to take action on this sort of situation than just to be at protests. You know what I mean? Like we live in like the age of the information era where you can literally go on the internet and there's so much stuff you can do just with like the click of a button on a computer. Like you can donate to like the organizations or whatever like that, and you can donate to the movements. You can keep up with the movements all just through social media platforms. So there's definitely like more ways than one to just even be involved in like this like history book chapter, you know what I mean?
Righto. Personally, for me, I'd like to say that it hasn't really been a major deal for me because to me, it doesn't really feel like it's my fight. And that's probably because I'm off in a suburban area and I'm Asian, so it's not exactly the biggest deal for me. But regardless, it does matter a lot to other people and a lot of people that I know. So I am willing to do my part when the opportunity comes up to me. And in contrast to what Jason just said, personally, I believe actions also speak louder than words. So when it comes to doing things over the internet, sometimes it is easier and sometimes more capable, but don't sleep on the power that being there in person can provide. After all, it does attract a lot of attention.
I guess so. I don't know. It's just, I think it is just seeing the people around me being able to go out and just literally risking their lives. They're literally risking their lives in this day and age to try to help fight against a cause. And I guess, like, I get what you mean, Calvin, saying that it feels like it's not really your um, topic to fight against. But the thing is, I feel like it's happening so close to us and all around us. And it's just like seeing all the pain that's going through, and then how, at least like with the police, I can never look at the police again like the same way. Especially just seeing how indiscriminate they are with violence. And it doesn't matter if you're a child, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a pregnant woman, it doesn't matter if you're a news reporter. Like how it's literally just straight up assault. And it's just like I personally, because I've had to like rely on the police's help a couple times because just bad things happen, but I don't think I can ever like look at it at them the same way as I know. Of course, there's so many police that are like heroes, and the ones that are like called like the bad, corrupt police are more like the minority. But like just looking at videos of protests and seeing like police officers just blocking off civilians as they're literally like crying in front of them, and they just have the straightest face. Like the police officers just have like the straightest face, just looking these crying protesters straight in the face. Like I can't. It's just something that is like gonna be burned in my memory.
Mhm. Personally, I think it is the sort of imprint that can leave is It's very strong. And trust in our police officers is sort of strained at the moment. But I'd like to say that we shouldn't use that as the baseline for our expectations of what police officers are like. They're currently embroiled in a very tense situation. It's not easy to be in, considering that as police officers, it's their obligation to maintain law and order. And in order to do that, sometimes you need to remain as stone faced as possible. So, even if there are moments of tragedy like that and happening right in front of them, they have to do their part to maintain law and order. It's just what they're supposed to do. And I know that there is a lot of violence that is breaking out as a result of these things. And I suppose on one hand, it is good that it's sort of helping us weed out the bad and violent parts of our police. But we should also consider that it is a difficult situation for them too, because this isn't exactly a situation that they're always prepared for. You get a few people who are perfectly conditioned for these high intensity situations, but if you think about it, a bunch of them out there could just be street cops who were totally used to just catching speed limit violators who are now forced to be in this drastic situation. And while mistakes can be made, it's important to remember that this isn't the norm. And while we may not look at the police the same way as we would before, it's important to remember that this is not the norm and that this is not the default state of things.
I guess, but there's a difference between law and order and doing the right thing.
Hmm.
And it's clear that they're not doing the right thing.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's almost like having to obey and listen to a higher order power rather than doing what's right for the people.
Hmm.
And I don't know, like, there's this, like, I've been, maybe this is just me, but I like to look through a lot of inspirational quotes because
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could
Yeah.
come up with inspirational quotes that really help. And like one of the ones that I found was by I think it was an Italian poet.
Hmm.
And I can't say his last name, but it's like Dante Alighieri or something like that. But his quote was, "Do not be afraid. Our fate cannot be taken from us, because it is a gift." And I've actually read this over a couple times, and I found it again just for this podcast. But just how I think that's something that's been really helping me a lot. Just because I don't know, I am terrified. Like I know we shouldn't be terrified, but I'm terrified about going outside. Like and I don't even have to be like, I know I'm like Asian American, but I don't know. I'm terrified to go outside and just like do anything. Like I'm kind of like extra shut in where other people go shopping and everything, but I haven't at all.
Hmm.
Um, but just remembering like I shouldn't be afraid because like our fate, our destinies, our futures, it's like they can't be taken from us.
Hmm.
And my voice of reason is just like they can be taken from us, but at the same time just telling myself they can't be taken from us because it's a gift that we
Definitely.
have. And just like really trying to process that, just sitting down and even in the midst of like all this like chaos and all this violence going rampant everywhere, just trying to sit and take a minute and just sit with that idea
Hmm.
has been helpful to me.
Oh well, I just want to say like you're like not the only one with that feeling because honestly, 2020 has been the biggest year ever where nobody wants to go outside because there's just so much like there's just so much stuff happening and I if you like literally even if you stay at home you're still exposed to this sort of stuff because um, you literally like if you just go on to Twitter it's the all the information is just everywhere you go like it's almost impossible to avoid and like I guess the event an event like this kind of reminds me of like sort of like not exactly but has like the vibe of like what happened during like 9/11 to like the US because like
Right.
when 9/11 happened like it really like unified the whole country behind like a specific like a specific movement, right, of like anti-terrorism. And like now I saw a tweet recently on Twitter where like it said all 50 states were participating in protests and were like involved in this movement. And that really goes to show that like this event right now that's happening is literally going to go down in history, because I don't
Yeah.
remember the last time there was something like this that has happened that has actually united the country into one, into one sort of unit. Not even the coronavirus did that. Because when the coronavirus happened, literally it was a state free for all. Like states were up against states. Nobody
That's
was united at all during the pandemic, but now it's about racism and like police brutality and abuse of power, and now all 50 states are like, okay, everyone get behind this right now. You know what I mean? And it's everywhere on social media. Literally everywhere.
it's almost like we found like a common enemy to fight against, to be honest, because with at least during like when the virus and everything, it was just a bunch of pointing fingers at everyone and like all this chaotic like blaming. But now it's like forming, and it's like we have a common enemy, and it's like everyone's just bonding and trying to fight against a common enemy, which is interesting because I've only heard of that like concept when it's been presidents trying to address a warring country, like a country they're fighting against. But here we actually have it like inside, like internal, which is something that is honestly really sad. But at the same time, I finally like we're trying to bond together as a nation, but also like I feel like it's more divided than ever.
Oh, certainly. If I may say, even though we're trying to make this into a sort of a very one-sided issue, we are getting multiple dimensions to it. For example, we have numerous officials who are using this opportunity to do some finger pointing, to sort of blame certain people for creating incredible amounts of chaos in the cities, or to go around protesting for misguided ideals. And because of that, we are getting some sort of divided views on how righteous some of these protests are being, and that is further complicated by something that is currently undermining the protests, which is the I think I'd call them opportunists. People who are using the large amounts of people out in the cities and the chaos to basically go around looting and destroying things in order to, basically just take advantage of this situation. And it's important to remember that these people are, for the most part, separate from the protesters, who are moving towards a strong and peaceful goal. However, they do blend in quite easily to the protesters, and sometimes their sentiments towards the police can mix up the movement and the police view on the protesters. It's creating conflict, danger, and a lot of tragedy in the streets. So the situation, even though it is unifying the states, it's not exactly coming easy to us. So for the people who are out there, it's going to be difficult. It really is.
Like even if you like all the things you talked about just now, like you can legit see it all just on the front page of Twitter, like with the looting and also like the people like getting behind this movement. But there's, not all protesters are like, you can't just take one protester and make that protester representative of the whole movement, right? This movement's like united a bunch of people together to get behind something, and honestly it's a lot easier to fight for something when that something is like something that you can clearly see. You know what I mean? In comparison to like the pandemic, the coronavirus is an invisible enemy. People can't see that shit. That's why it was so hard for people to get behind that. But in this case, there's like people see the stuff that has happened, and people are like, okay, we know we have this like thing that we're all trying to strive for. So it's like a lot easier for people to like get behind this. But I do get what you mean by like opportunists, and how like, I don't know, that Target incident that happened and everything.
You're definitely right. Although something that you did say is, personally, it's gotten me kind of upset. Where we're more united against a visible enemy than an invisible one.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I feel kind of upset about that because the coronavirus was something that was really going to target everybody
Yeah.
and was really putting everyone at fret. And if we did unite against that, it would literally be to fight one bad guy, which would be the coronavirus. But something that's got me worried is that if you are fighting a visible enemy, it's material, it's solid, and in this case it's people. I feel like it might be easier to go out of your way to attack it, or to to literally fight it, because it's there, and even the actions of a single person can make an effect towards, well, progress of some kind. And it's got me worried because physical things make people a little more willing. How that turns out, I'm not entirely too sure, but it can occur in some dangerous ways. But that's just my opinion.
And another thing that I wanted to talk about was like how with a lot of the protests going on right now, like the U.S. government is like going great lengths to like try to like shut this stuff down. You know what I mean? Like
What do you mean by that?
they're even like sending in the military. Like Trump is like sending in the military and junk to even like get these protests to like chill out. And
Hmm.
which is crazy because it's crazy because like protests a couple weeks back about like ending quarantine and lockdown, like Trump was like coming out and saying, oh, like those protesters, like they're good people, let them reopen the country and let them have what they want. And
Hmm.
now like a bunch of mainly minority group people from minority groups are coming out and protesting like um, against racism and the justice system and all this stuff. And now Trump is just like, oh, like he literally gave the okay to like just like put these people down
Hmm.
lit on his Twitter, like on the president's very own Twitter account. He literally gave the okay, like okay, like you can get like the military's coming in and they can stop. They have all the power that they can have to end the protests that are going on right now. And like the contrast between those two events is like super super like different. I feel like the
Yeah.
demographic of those two protests were also very different, and it's crazy to see how Trump changes his stance just from like that alone.
Hmm. Besides the rather volatile situation in the streets, there are also some issues that we'd like to discuss that go a little beyond that and hit a lot closer to home for a lot of other people. Jason, you said that you wanted to discuss about information.
Well, like I said earlier, you can get all your information about this just through the internet, and you can't navigate the internet without running into anything regarding this whole protest situation. And you're gonna see all sides of it everywhere, I feel. Like there's so many things talking about Black Lives Matter, there's so many things talking about Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, a bunch of different hashtags everywhere. And like it's hard because I feel like people in this day and age, they're not you can obviously in social media you can pick and choose what you want to see, and a lot of people don't always get to see the whole picture because they choose what they like, they choose what they retweet, they choose what they look at, and then a lot of people go misinformed or whatever because obviously social media can be a really powerful tool. You can totally inform yourself on everything that's happening just from using it. Some people, though, are not always going to be like that, and they're just going to seek the information that they want to hear. You know what I mean? But I also feel like social media is very important right now because I've heard rumors of like the mainstream media being censored or like biased towards like the law enforcement and like the actions of the police officers that are going on right now. And like the George Floyd police officers like didn't even get like charged with you know didn't even get charged until like all these protests happened, and there were other countries that even got involved, and there were like so many other groups that had to voice their opinion on the matter in order for this to actually happen, which is actually insane.
if I may interject, I think there's actually, on one hand, it is good that we are getting support from various international players in large pieces, but it's really got me wondering actually about I suppose a lot about, I guess, who's got a lot of clout in the matters as there is. Like, it feels like we're getting a lot of opinions and statements from big players who seem rather removed from this sort of big playing field. You get a lot of businesses that are showing their support for the protests, and you get support from a lot of personas. And I think there was even like one comment from China, or a Chinese ambassador, and personally I thought that was rather strange. And it feels kind of odd because some of these people feel like they really shouldn't have a place in this argument. I understand that they can have a lot of workers that are involved in the movement, but sometimes I feel that they're putting in a lot more influence than they ought to be. For example, we've got major media who are trying to who are growing increasingly more political. And then we've got our major companies which produce materials for consumers, and it's really got me wondering because it feels like every time that there is a major social issue, they produce either a commercial or they put a tweet out to say that they are showing their support for this thing, even though that it really wouldn't make much sense for them to show support. For example, if there were maybe a protest in a city with a known manufacturer, I can imagine support like that. But you get stuff from these big companies which are all over the US and from personas on the internet who are mostly entertainers who are voicing their opinion either out of obligation or maybe just a need to sort of be involved on it. And it's really got me wondering if this is the proper way to go about doing it.
I guess everyone feels like they need to say something on it, or else they're racist, or they're uninformed, or something
Hmm.
negative. I feel
They're part of
that
the problem.
that's why you
Yeah,
have at
if
least
they're not saying anything.
yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you guys have like witnessed this, but okay, I am not a social media person at all. I literally posted my first tweet last week. And I've really only been able to engage in social media like through my friends and like hearing. I've been trying to like actually like make accounts and like get more updated because of everything going on. But I don't know if you guys have noticed with seeing how like at least a lot of like my white friends from high school, they're all like posting like paragraphs or like statements saying how like they're acknowledging the Black Lives Matters movement, or like how talking about white privilege, or talking about something like that. It's like almost like all of them. And
Hmm.
I found that really interesting too. I mean, it's like when I read that, I'm like like especially if it's I'm just like, oh wow, great on you guys that you guys feel like you're comfortable enough to say all this, you're trying to share it with the world. But at the same time, it's also thinking like, is it really just all genuinely coming from the heart, or is it feeling like they have to hop onto the bandwagon
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah,
order to
exactly.
justify themselves? So I think that's where it's really like what you were saying, that really got me thinking about that.
Yeah, dude, literally, social media is part of my job. Like, my actual job. And don't, like, look, I think social media is great, but I also think social media just sucks. Like, if it never existed, I could honestly, like, I would be okay living in a world where it just never existed.
Hmm.
Because, and it's literally part of my job too. Like, I hate it and I love it because it's great for connecting, but it's terrible because it's changed, like, how people think so much. Because now social media is just kind of a sponge for people to go to get like social reciprocation and like hop on bad bandwagons to get behind people that they want to look good, like they people want to look like good people, so they're gonna jump on bandwagons and they're gonna get behind things that everyone else is getting behind because that's like the cool thing and the good thing to do, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and you can
so
also get validated.
yeah,
Yeah.
people want validation. People want to feel like they're a part of something. People want to feel like they're a part of something. I think that's also a very important
Hmm.
point to bring up.
Yeah.
Social
Like,
media has allowed for people to connect in ways that Like, we would have never imagined people to be able to do, like, 10, 20, 30 years ago, you know what I mean?
So, the conditions of the world today are rather volatile, whether you're involved in person or out of person. Personally, the best that we can recommend is for you to really try to get your information through a lot of sources and try to pick out the truth carefully. And if you're getting involved in it yourself, then there's nothing more that I can recommend than really just to stay safe. But for us here at the studio, there's not much else that we can really say on it. We're not the biggest researchers, or especially about this topic. This is mostly an opinion piece.
I just want to throw in there, as we like come to a close of this episode, that like all of our hearts are like out there with all of you good doodles, like sitting with you as you listen to this episode or wash the dang dishes, eating spicy noodles like silently with you at the dinner table, like crying with you as you lay in bed and like just think about what's going on with the world, and fighting with you as you get out there and scream at the top of your lungs protesting. We're just here with you through it all, and I hope that hopefully you can come talk to us and find the same comfort.
All right, everybody. I'm Calvin.
I'm Jason.
I'm Gigi.
Thanks for tuning in again to the Spicy Noodles podcast, number 2.
We hope to talk to you guys again. Bye
All
bye.
right. We'll see you again soon.